You're listening to The Streaming Wars, the podcast that discusses all of the latest happenings regarding your favorite streaming services. Find out which service is winning the war this time around.
Hello everyone and welcome to the latest episode of The Streaming Wars. This time around, Tony and I are going to be talking about Peacock, the service that we know the least amount about. And to be fair and to be upfront, this episode is going to be probably the shortest episode we've ever produced because there's quite honestly not a whole lot to talk about. We are actually recording this shortly after, just a couple weeks after the time that they actually announced a lot of what their plans are. And to be fair, there isn't a whole lot of information that was actually announced. They did announce that they are planning on releasing in spring 2020, which is going to be, they specifically said they're going to be trying to aim for an April 2020 release. They did announce some deals that they have in place, but who is Peacock? If you haven't noticed, Peacock is going to be the streaming service coming from NBCUniversal, which is owned by Comcast. Currently, their stock price is $44, and they have $251 billion in assets. As we know now, there's absolutely no subscribers because they don't have anything that's even comes close to what they currently are going to be offering. And we have no idea what the price is, other than they have stated that they have plans to have an ad-supported version of it, which means you're going to see at least two tiers with the ad-supported version and then the non-ad supported. So basically similar to it's similar in the vein of what Hulu is, where you can have it with ads or you can have it without ads. So there's that, but of course that could change because, as we talked about in the last episode, that was originally something that Warner Media was floating around, and that didn't end up happening. So the only other announcements that actually came out as far as what's going to be part of it is that the shows The Office and Parks and Recreation, which are currently over at Netflix, will be eventually coming over to NBCUniversal's service, Peacock. That service, those shows are locked in at Netflix. For The Office is locked in until the end of 2020, and Parks and Recreation, I believe, is locked in until the end of 2021. They also said that they're going to be pushing a lot of content when it comes to the Summer Olympics, because that's next year. They also said that they have a variety of other shows that they're working on, a new version of Battlestar Galactica, some other dramas and comedies.
Another reboot to Battlestar Galactica.
Yes. Another one.
Why?
There's also this was part of their actual press release. They're going to have their reboots, that's the way they labeled them, of Saved by the Bell and Punky Brewster. There's the show AP Bio, which was on NBC, is going to be moving over to the streaming service exclusively. They also have a movie spinoff from the long-running series Psych. It'll be the second movie from that. They also have some other unscripted stuff, and they included a wide variety of content that they consider timeless titles, such as 30 Rock, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Cheers, Friday Night Lights, Parenthood, Royal Pains, Superstore, Top Chef, Will and Grace, basically any of the stations that NBCUniversal owns. So you got Bravo, E, they have obviously MSNBC, CNBC, all of the business and news stations that they have. They have a lot of different stations out there, including obviously the most prominent one, which is NBC itself. And then they also have all of the Universal video, or the film catalog as well. So you got franchises like Jaws, Jurassic Park, Fast and the Furious, Despicable Me, the Bourne films. So they have a lot of content, and they've been around for a very long time. The company has the NBCUniversal formed as a company in 2004 after NBC and Universal joined, but they were owned partially by GE up until Comcast bought them in the early 2010s, and Comcast has been around since 1963. So, all that being said, let's be honest here. There's not a whole lot to talk about. So, what do you think about Peacock?
Well, peacocks are large, colorful pheasants, typically blue or green, known for their iridescent tails. The term peacock is actually it's used for both sexes, but really male birds are called peacocks, females are called peahens, and together they're called peafowl. That's peacocks. Wait,
Yes.
we're going to talk about that.
Yes. So if you couldn't tell by Tony's sarcasm here, Peacock is a very strange name to name your service, but the name derives from NBC's original logo, which is a peacock. The rainbow peacock. Yes, that's where they're deriving this name from. The back in the very early days of television when NBC existed, their logo was a peacock that would walk and then spread its wings, and that would be spread its
That's
feathers.
what that is.
Yeah. And
Wow, I feel like an idiot.
and that's what it was. And then eventually when we got into color television, it was always a rainbow color to show, hey, look, we have color TV. But more recently, it's not really used. I mean, like the rainbow colors have always been used for NBC. I'm pretty sure NBC probably has the most known sound series when it comes to their like channel recognition symbol, which is dun dun dun, because it's been that for years, while other stations don't really have something like that. So yeah,
Learned something new today.
yes.
Wow.
So that's where Peacock derives from, but it is an odd name. I mean,
It is an odd name. So we heard when I heard that from the press release, I'm like, that's a streaming service. Like, why are we talking about birds? It was really weird.
It is very strange when you look at, like, you compare it to NBC or to HBO Max, with HBO Max name obviously deriving from a established service that's been around for a very long time and generally warrants quality content, and you can see why Warner Media decided to use that name, as we talked about in the last episode. This time around, Peacock is not something that you immediately associate. I mean, there are plenty of people who would realize, Tony obviously is not one of them, that the peacock is coming from the NBC logo. But there's a lot of people who probably don't even realize that the NBC logo is a peacock. So they're probably not going to make the connection. So it is a very, very strange name choice because, in fact, it doesn't, like, if you just said the word peacock, you're not going to immediately associate it with one of these, with the company behind the name. You know, HBO Max, you're going to associate with HBO. And while you might not associate with all the other HBO content, you are going to associate with HBO. And that by itself could lead you to believe that the higher price is going to be warranted. You look at Disney Plus, it's literally just Disney with the plus sign. So you're going to get Disney plus more. You look
CBS All Access.
Yeah, CBS All Access. All access to CBS content. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. This, not at all. This is not straightforward. I mean, I made the connection, but I'm also well versed when it comes to the history of a lot of these media companies. I don't know that the general audience is going to make the connection and really be able to associate it. I mean, as time progresses, sure, but it's a very strange name to name your service, especially right before something like the Olympics, which the Olympics have been closely associated with NBC for a very long time. I don't know that people are going to be like, oh, I should really sign up for Peacock because they're going to have the Olympics. They're going to have to advertise the heck out of it to make it work.
Do we know? Well, I know we don't know anything besides that both male and female peacocks are called peafowl. Do we know the price or a rough estimation of the subscriber price?
The analyst things that I saw was basically on the line of what Hulu's prices are, which I believe is $6 for an ad-supported version and somewhere in the neighborhood of like $10 to $12 for the non-ad version of the service. That's what I've seen floated around.
That's not bad.
I mean, it's definitely not bad in comparison to a higher price service like HBO Max, but keeping in mind the Apple TV Plus and Disney Plus will not have ads whatsoever and will be around the exact same price as their ad-supported version, if that is the direction that they end up going. So that's slightly worrisome because while they could potentially offer more content they will offer more content than a service like Apple TV Plus, and to be quite honest, they might have more content than Disney. It's kind of up in the air because I think until they actually announce what will be part of the services, you don't really know how many hours worth of content are actually on the service until they announce that. We'll get a very good idea of what's going to be on Disney very soon here, and I'm sure someone will compile how many hours of television it is, or Disney will release a press release stating how much content will actually be available on the service, which is more likely. But NBC Universal, even with more content than Disney, it's still priced, $3 to $5 more than what Disney is. It is interesting. I mean, I don't think they'll go anywhere near the price range of what HBO Max is, but it's definitely one of those situations where you have to wonder also why they want to go in the ad-supported direction when nobody else seems to be doing that. If for no other reason other than just so that they have an avenue of, they have some sort of avenue of making revenue.
I think it's the latter. I think that they're trying to hedge their bets, and I wouldn't buy the service. I mean, I love The Office a whole bunch, and I've rewatched it more times than I want to care to admit. And I love Parks and Rec too, but I'm not going to buy a service for it. And I would put up ads for it. I'd suffer that. And that's why, ads, they're going to get a consistent source of revenue. NBC, I'm not sure if they're going to ever compete with, Netflix type numbers, Hulu type numbers, Disney type numbers. That I'm going to foresee Disney and HBO Max type numbers. I think they're going to be a very niche service. Thankfully for them, you have the Universal backlog, which is pretty huge, and they still crank out movies. And NBC has been known to create some great dramas and comedies throughout the years. It used to be, The Office, Parks and Rec, Cheers, 30 Rock, all those great shows. I think right now, This Is Us is on NBC. You got, the Chicago Med series that people like, and Chicago Fire, and all those different things. Law and Order, man, my sister could watch Law and Order for days. So you have all these great, shows and great bingeable content, which is good for NBC. Bingeable content, I think, is, original content's sexy, but I think for these services, bingeable content is, necessary for these, services to survive. That's what's going to keep you coming back around. And thankfully, NBC has that type of a catalog. And so I think it's going to be a niche service. I think that it's going to really rely on its history. Besides the Olympics, that's going to be a great way to infuse new subscribers for that month. And then maybe they stick around and watch something else. I think this is going to be niche. I think ad-supported is a safe bet.
The other thing to keep in mind is because while HBO Max is owned by AT&T, which still is an ISP, still has cable services that they offer, it's within some point of their company, as well as the fact that they still have DirecTV. When you look at them, there's a reliance on the cable side of things because they still make money on that. NBC Universal is owned by Comcast, which is specifically and directly gets the vast majority of their money from, in fact, cable services. So it's one of those things where I'm not sure. I definitely agree with you in the sense of it's probably not going to be there. This is probably the one service, while it has a massive catalog of content, it's probably the one service that will not be creating a massive amount of new content. When you compare what has been announced for HBO Max compared to NBC Universal or to Peacock, I just don't really want to call it Peacock. I really don't. But the
Call
thing
it Peafowl.
Peafowl. But the thing is, but the thing is, like, if you compare the amount of content, and I know that there's a couple months in between, so there's still a chance that they could announce a bunch more stuff, but there is nowhere near as much content that they're planning on releasing for Peacock than they are for HBO Max. It's exclusive to the service. So the idea that they could potentially be in even the realm of competing with these other services, when you look at the content that is coming to Disney Plus, I mean, just the Marvel shows alone, I think outlist the amount of original programming that Peacock has.
I was going to say, I think Peacock is more on the same category as CBS All Access in terms of, I think, potential growth. If we want to compare and contrast, I don't think, compare and contrast NBC with Netflix right now is a great idea. I could see Disney because they have a lot more hype to them and they're more interesting as a company. But if I were to compare and contrast, I would compare NBCUniversal, the Peacock. I don't want to call it that. Compare PFL and CBS All Access because I'm interested. I'm not a Star Trek fan, but they're creating new Star Trek content that I know people will like. People will get the service for it. There are a lot of people who already love Discovery. They're making a Picard series. Like my dad is going to sign up for that because he loves, Jean-Luc Picard. And they're really delving into, those types of properties. And so I think comparing and contrasting with like CBS, I think that's a good competitor. I am more interested in CBS, even though I love The Office, but original content wise, I think NBC is really lacking in comparison to like something like a CBS type company role.
Yeah, and I think that, that could change. At this point, we're in the very early stages of knowing what exactly they're going to be offering. To be completely honest, the stuff that they have announced, nothing they've announced is really drawing me in by any means. I'm looking at their list, which we'll have this in the show notes. I'm looking at the list of stuff, and while I watched Saved by the Bell when I was a kid, I don't know that I'd be that interested in watching a reboot of it.
How does that even make sense? They would have been grown up by now.
Yeah, I don't know. And I never paid attention to Battlestar Galactica. And that's not to say that they don't have some shows. To be fair, I don't subscribe to CBS All Access. But if I did, I would be checking out Twilight Zone because that is something that I would be interested in. But I'm not going to subscribe to a service just for one single show. While we are considering this a major service at this point, this is not necessarily set in stone because, as Tony pointed out, it is very much, at least what we know now, is very much comparable to CBS All Access, which is primarily focused on creating content within the United States, and a lot of the content, the original content, is actually being licensed to other places. Like, for example, Star Trek Discovery was licensed to Netflix for international distribution. So, needless to say, there's plenty of opportunities for them to be bigger than CBS All Access. And they have a massive backing with Comcast and massive library that they have from NBCUniversal. But it really will just come down to how this actually rolls out. They're going to be putting in focus on the sports, which is great. But will that actually make a difference? I'm unaware if CBS All Access offers sports. I'm not sure. I don't think they do, mostly because CBS, by my understanding, deals primarily with football. Yeah, it must be it's probably just college.
NFL,
stuff.
Golf.
Because when you look at NBC, they have NBC Sports, which focuses on a lot of different sports. They made a big deal about how they have golf, they have tennis, they have
Sunday Night Football, which draws in a lot of watchers and advertising revenue.
I can see the sports element of it, but it's more of the sports element isn't probably going to be something that's going to be highly marketable internationally. And the one thing we haven't really heard when it comes to NBCUniversal is whether or not they even have plans to have this as an international service. At this point in time, we don't know because that hasn't even been discussed because it's so early on right now in the planning stages, I guess. So it could just end up being like a CBS All Access situation where it's a lower price point with ad support, and you can, there is a tier that you can get no ads, but the idea is that they're creating content. They're just creating a small amount of content, not anywhere near the level of Disney Plus or Netflix or Amazon Prime Video or HBO Max, and then eventually Apple down the line. But yeah, so it's very fluid on whether or not we keep considering this a major service, but for now we're considering it one because we just don't know enough about it. While we're not going to be doing an episode specifically dedicated to CBS All Access or any of the other smaller services that are out there, we will be talking about them as time progresses.
Well, we're pretty much covered CBS.
Yeah. In this episode, exactly. So, the extent of it is what you can expect from us going forward, because we're going to wrap up the episode at this point, but what you can expect from us going forward is, now that we've gotten through basically the introduction of what we're going to be doing, and we've gotten through these current state of episodes, which some of them were longer than others, and some of them we had good things to say, while others we have our doubts. The reality of it is, now we're going to launch into really current events, and a lot of what we're going to be discussing on a normal basis is the latest news coming out of all of these streaming services. We're not going to necessarily talk about every single trailer that gets released by Netflix, or a new trailer gets released for some of the thing, but we'll talk about some of the projects that we're interested in, and we'll make a mention of talking about projects that, you know, seem to be getting a lot of talk from a variety of different avenues of audiences. But then in addition to that, we'll be discussing a lot of the news, a lot of the business stuff. We're going to be getting into a lot more of the business side of things when it comes to dealing with the quarterly financials when they're all released, which is right around the corner. So as you're listening to this, the next episode, we could have some of those that we could talk about, but we'll be talking about new announcements for new shows that get announced, new deals that get in place for these services. And then obviously, as more information gets released for the services that have yet to have release dates and price points, we'll be talking about that stuff too. So a lot of what you can expect from Tony and I is more of a topic, or, you know, topics, hot topics, and discussions about those specific topics and how they pertain to the overall streaming wars. So that's what you can expect from us in the future. If you are so inclined, you can also submit topics to us by sending us an email at thestreamingwars@gmail.com. We'll go through those suggestions, and we'll talk about some of those things, time permitting, on some of the future episodes. We don't necessarily, we're not planning on having a specific set schedule where we release a episode every single Thursday or every single Friday or anything like that. Right now, it's very fluid in the sense of, we kind of got to get a feel of how much news we actually have. We don't want to promise a new episode every single week and then not have enough content to actually warrant that. That could obviously change based off of the topics that you guys send in to us.
But let's be honest, we're gonna talk about this. We like talking about this.
Yes, we like talking about this, and we're gonna try to provide you as much content as you possibly can without you getting super sick of us. So just make sure you subscribe to us on whatever podcast platform you are currently using, as well as we are releasing these episodes over on YouTube as well, so you could subscribe over there to get the show over there. You can follow us on Twitter and Instagram for all the latest news related to new episodes that we are posting. Twitter, we're going to be using more of we're going to be reposting a lot of the news that's coming out, retweeting the articles that we're seeing, the trailers that we're seeing. We also have a Discord, which will be the same exact thing. We'll be posting a lot of the articles and trailers that we're seeing for these different services, as well as the other services that are out there. And you'll obviously be able to keep up with all of the latest episodes that we have, because we'll be talking about that as well. So hopefully you guys are on board for what we're doing. We hope we gave you a real good introduction to all of these different services and what is known up to this point. And you guys are looking forward to basically the overall idea of what this new age of media is really going to become, because we're going to see a lot of different things happening. And who's to say we couldn't see some more services pop up in the future? I mean, most of the larger media companies already have things lined up, but that's not to say Facebook couldn't decide tomorrow that they're going to want to ramp up and start creating a mass amount of content and change the model that they're doing. And we'll
FCC violation waiting to happen.
Yeah, it is.
Investigation waiting to happen.
But so all of that said, we plan on bringing you a bunch of content, and we hope you guys enjoy and subscribe and give us feedback, because that's always greatly appreciated. So with that being said, for Tony and myself, we'll see you guys next time.
Thanks for listening to the Streaming Wars. Check us out on Twitter and Instagram. Also consider supporting us on Patreon. Links can be found at thestreamingwars.io.